All right, let's get started. Shh. All right. Everyone good? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Questions or anything in your minds? No? All right, we can start. Today we're continuing our topic on easements. And I want to ask a question to start to refresh our recollection from last class. So this is your question, and read this one carefully. Adam, who owns wet acre and dry acre, conveys wet acre to Betsy. But Adam retains the right to use the lake on wet acre. The question here is, what is the dominant estate? A, Adam, B, Betsy, C, wet acre, D, dry acre, or E, none of the above. All right, go ahead and answer. What? I have zero control over the app, so if it's not working, I can't help you. A little light attendance today. Okay. You're here. Thank you. All right, another 10 seconds or so. Anyone else put your answer in? All right, I'm going to stop it there. All right, so let's ask some questions first. Who's next? Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. All right, so the question begins. Adam owns wet acre and dry acre. Adam conveys wet acre to Betsy. But Adam retains the right to use a lake on wet acre. Okay? What does it mean to retain the right to use the lake on wet acre? What does that mean? What do you call that? Okay, you're right. You seem uncertain, though.
Well, I'm going back to dominant estate.
Well, we're not there. We're not there. We're still a ways away from there, right? So at the most basic level, Adam retains an easement, right? And what does the easement allow him to do?
Use the lake on wet acre.
Okay, good. Now, Melanie, let me ask you a follow-up question. Oh, boy. You're right. You're right. I know, that was her. I heard her.
I already picked my fight this week.
Oh, you have more left in you. We have another class tonight. Liz?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Oh, God. They're so excited. Let me ask you a question. How do you create an easement at common law? What did you have to do to create an easement at common law?
Don't you have to ask for permission, license or something?
No. How do you have to create an easement at the common law? What was the rule from the Willard case on Tuesday or last class?
All I have is common law rule is messy.
That's when you have to know.
Okay.
You have to know the messy rule.
Yeah, I didn't write it down. Sorry.
Alexandra?
Or you have to reserve it, and you have to sell it to
Yes.
someone.
Yes. At common law, you couldn't sell an easement as a separate interest. At common law, the only way to create an easement was as part of a transaction, a sale. So this is what happens here. Adam sold wet acre to Betsy, but Adam reserved an easement for himself. Basically, he had a full bundle of 6, he had a fee simple, but then he gave to Betsy a partial bundle, retaining for himself the stick to come on and use the lake on wet acre. Okay? All right. So Rand, let me ask you another question. What's the servient estate in this question?
Would be Whitaker,
Okay. Why is Whitaker the servient estate here?
because they're basically serving the needs
Of,
of Adam, or whoever has retained rights to it
well, who retained the rights? Is it Adam or someone else?
right now.
Is anyone else?
Oh, well, I guess Betsy would still have it too, but no, he's the one who's.
Okay. All right. So Mike, now you're next. What's the dominant estate here?
There is one.
Why?
Because they're both the serving only now.
Why do you say that?
Because
You say there's no dominant estate. Why not? What about Adam?
are we talking about like gross?
Well, you tell me. What are we talking about here? What kind of easements we got here?
Because it's a gross. It's a gross.
What's the phrase? It's not a gross easement. It's a, yeah, easement in gross.
In gross.
Okay,
Yes.
you're right. Mike, with an easement in gross,
It's a person.
what's it?
The easement is to a person.
It benefits a person, right?
Right.
Okay, and we'll just finish off, Mike. With an easement in gross, is there a servient estate?
Yes.
Okay, and what's servient here?
Is Whitaker.
Good. Is there a dominant estate?
No.
Okay, that's right. That's the answer. There is no dominant estate here. So your answer here is D. Wow, that's spread. That's actually a good distribution. About half of you got it. But let me go through one at a time. A lot of you put. No, the answer is E. None of the above. So a lot of you put D, dry acre. That was the second most popular answer. And the reason why you put it is like, aha, dry acre is the one that's being benefited. But look at how the question's framed. Adam, a person's name, retains it. When the person's named in the deed who retains it, you need to think to yourself, that's an easement in gross. And when you have an easement in gross, you only have a servient estate. There is no dominant estate. Okay? Now, a bunch of you put A, right? Adam. That's, well, I was trying to trick Mike up. It didn't work, right? When I asked for an estate, I know better. When I ask for an estate, I'm asking for the name of a piece of land. I'm asking for a person's name. I get this every year in the exam. What's the dominant estate? Mike. No. Adam. Betsy. No. I want a piece of land, right? So this question is tricky because there's just a lot going on. But the correct answer here is none of the above. There is no dominant estate for an easement in gross. Everyone with me on that one? Oh, yes, Melanie.
Do you have words for what Adam and Betsy are, other than like owners? Like easement holders or something?
I think you would. Betsy is irrelevant, and I don't say that lightly, right? Betsy, hopefully no Betsy's here, right? Betsy doesn't matter. Betsy's merely a placeholder, right? She's merely the person residing on Black Acre at a given moment, or Wet Acre at a given moment, right? So she doesn't really matter. She's just the owner. Mike, on the other hand, not Mike, damn it. Adam, on the other hand, actually does matter because it's a benefit he himself possesses. So I think you'd say that Adam has, Adam benefits from the easement in gross. There's not really a name for it. I know what you're asking me. There's not really a name for it. It's not like a grantor, grantee. They don't have like labels like that. But I see what you're getting at. All right, questions on this quiz? All right, so good. About 50% of you got it. That's not bad. Okay. All right. Let me begin by reviewing some terminology because we did a lot of terminology. You'll have to just know these phrases. The dominant tenement or estate is a land that's benefited. The servient tenement or estate is a land that's burdened. We have two major types of easements. You have the easement appurtenant. And with the easement appurtenant, the burden goes to whoever owns a piece of land. And the second one is an easement in gross. And that's where the benefit goes to a named person. And the trick is, I won't tell you in the exam this is an easement in gross. You'll have to know. And the way you know is if a person's named, like Adam, then that tells you you're easement in gross. And once you have an easement in gross, you have to recognize that there's not going to be a dominant estate. Okay? Last class, we also discussed a license. A license is usually oral. It can be written, but it's usually oral. Permission to use property. Generally, a license can be revoked, but there's some rare exceptions in what we call estoppel or unfairness, where the court prevents a license from being revoked. This sort of like not ownership, but you have this kind of right to use that. That's just a judicial creation. Okay? Other questions with that? All right, today we want to do two topics. The first topic is what we call implied easements. And the second topic we'll talk about easements by prescription. Okay? All right, Lacey, what does the word implied mean? As a general matter in law, what does implied mean? Right, not express, right? But in law, generally when they say something's implied, what am I getting at? What does that mean, something's implied?
The surrounding circumstances.
Okay, let me ask the question more directly. Usually in law, who does the implying?
The person who wants it?
Can I just will something by saying I want an easement?
No.
Who does the implication? Who's actually ordering it?
Oh, the court.
The court, right, exactly. In law, yeah, dude, the questions, I'll get you where you need to go eventually. It's how many questions it takes me to get there. It's either one question or 10 questions. I'll get there. In law, we call something implied when it's not express, right? If you have a written instrument, an express easement, you don't rely on the courts. You have a document. But often, you don't have an express document. You want the courts to imply one. Or let me use a less fancy word, how about create one, right? You want the courts to create an easement for your benefit. Okay? You go to the court, you say, Your Honor, I don't have a written easement, but can you do one for me? Right? Can you make one up for me? That's what implied easements are. All right? There are two major types of implied easements. The first is called a quasi-easement. Quasi, the Q-U-A-S-I, a quasi-easement. And the second is what's called easement by necessity. Easement by necessity. Just so you know, prescription, that other thing I said we're talking about, that does not fall within the elements of implied easements. Right? Prescription is something very different. Right? And I'll briefly explain why. Prescription is designed by statute. The statute says, do something for 10 years, it's yours, right? The courts aren't making stuff up there. There's actually a rule the government puts forward, the legislature writes a statute, and you follow it. So prescription is not implied. Implied easement is when the court's acting based on its equitable powers to right some wrong. Okay? Again, don't think of a prescription as implied easement. It's a different category altogether. Okay? So, Davis, I think you're next. Did I do everyone? Okay. Down front. All right, Davis. Tell me, sir, what is a quasi-easement? A quasi-easement. Chris?
So I watched the video earlier, I was like, where was this in the book?
I think it goes in the beginning. Yeah, Tom, help us.
Quasi-easement is.
I'll come back to you, Davis.
Like was something that is almost there, but not.
Okay, right. A quasi-easement is an easement created by the courts in specific circumstances. Say you've been doing something for a long time, but you don't meet the requirements of prescription. Let's say the limit's 10 years, and you've been doing it for 9, right? And on the 9th year, you get kicked out. In some cases, the courts can say, we know you don't meet the requirements of the statute, but we're going to imply an easement for you anyway, right? You know, the statute says 10 years. You did 9, close enough, right? And the courts will basically make one up for you as a matter of fairness or equity, you might call it. Okay? Again, the key point here is with the quasi easements, you do not meet the statutory requirements. If you meet the statutory requirements, you don't need the mercy of the courts. You can just say, hey, 10 years, I'm good, I win, right? But if you only get 9, you need to go to the court's mercy. Okay? Dave, let's try this one. What's an easement by necessity?
It's an easement that grants the party something it needs to access something.
When we say needs, just be a little bit more specific. What does that mean?
Like an example from the case would be a road to access the main road.
Yeah, but so what? How come you got to get to the road? What's so important about that? Does everyone need her?
Get off your land.
Ah, okay. Thank you. An easement by necessity is an easement that's implied when the court finds you have some very serious need, right? You have to show not just that you've been doing it for a long time, but that you really need it, right? Think of the first case, the Van Valkenburg case. Remember, they cut across the lot to avoid having to walk around a very hilly area? You don't need to cut across the lot. You can walk down the hilly area. But there are going to be some cases where you're landlocked, right? And the only way for you to get off the damn land is to cross someone's property. And let's say you're crossing it all these years, and with permission, you're fine. But then all of a sudden there's a conflict. And the guy puts up a fence, a spite fence, right? Puts up a metal cable on the road. At that point, you say, Your Honor, I really need to get off this land. I'm stuck here. I can't be arrested for trespassing every day. And those situations, the court can imply an easement by necessity. Again, the difference between the two, you have quasi-easement, that's just a general matter of fairness based on prior use, right? You have to show some pattern of behavior. With the easement by necessity, you don't need to show prior use. Maybe you never needed it, right? Maybe there was a storm that washed away a road all of a sudden, and this is a sudden urgent need that just popped up. Okay. What makes the easement by necessity a little bit trickier is in different states you have different rules. Texas, for example, we'll have a Texas case coming up in a minute. Texas requires what's called strict necessity. Strict necessity, which means you absolutely have to have this easement. There's no, well, maybe you need it, maybe you don't, right? If you're landlocked and you're by the water, maybe you can take a boat instead, right? If there's a mountain, well, maybe you can climb down the mountain, right? I'm being a little bit dramatic, but the Texas courts are not willing to imply easements by necessity. It's a very demanding standard. Yes?
What if you have some sort of like handicap?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I'll be perfectly frank. A lot of these old cases came before the entire notion of disabilities and public accommodations. That wasn't really a thing. I don't think the case law, as far as I know, countenances that. Like, I need to build a wheelchair ramp, right, across someone's land, otherwise I can't get out of my house. I think how a court would do it is they would say, well, we're going to do it as a matter of quasi, we're not getting necessity, so they kind of just shift to the general fairness envelope. But I don't think the case will develop with disability access in mind. I think that's probably my short answer. Yes, Mike?
So would you say the Texas law, your landlocked could get to the road if you cut down the trees and made your own road? Would that?
Yeah, I
that would be
mean,
one of those when the court said, no, you can do that.
yeah,
That's-
yeah, absolutely. If there's some modification you can do to your land to get there, that's something you ought to do,
Okay.
right? I mean, I mean, there are cases where they say use a helicopter, right? Use a helicopter, maybe exaggeration, but use a boat, right? If you can boat and dock somewhere else, you can get off it, right? But the idea is, if you want that easement, then you got to pay for it, right? Do it with an arm's length transaction, and don't force the courts to get involved. All right. Let's do the first case. I think, Chris, you're up next. Let's give me the facts in Othen of Rosier. I think it's the only Texas Supreme Court case of the semester, 1950.
In this case, two families, Othen and Rosier, bought parts of the.
You say
large-
Rosier.
Rosier.
I don't know. How would you say Rosier or Rosier? I don't know. I've heard both ways. Rose? Not in Texas. Right. All right, go on.
They bought parts of a larger part of land from other people who bought it from the original owner, Hill. Rosier got their land in 24. Othen got his land separately in 04 and 13. While Othen was in use of his land, he had to cross over portions of land owned by others, since there's never a public road that made contact with his land in any part.
Good.
Rosier eventually put up a levee that made the road unusable for Othen.
But then the levee was dry, right?
Huh?
Sorry. You actually got that one. Good. Yeah, go on.
So,
Bye-bye.
yeah.
Okay. Go on.
Oh, it's nothing like an American. Okay. So the levee caused the road to flood.
Okay.
That Othen usually used, so he filed suit saying that he argued an implied reservation of right of way, and then he also argued, he had prescriptive rights to the use of the easement as well.
Okay, very good. All right, let me walk through the sequencing here, because the ordering actually matters. But before I do that, let's talk about a very basic principle. In law, we presume that people are not stupid. It's probably a bad assumption, but we presume people act rationally. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but we presume people act rationally. So we ask ourselves, would a rational person sell land in a way that landlocks them in? The answer is no. There's this picture in your book, it's on page 793. We'll come back to it in a few minutes. But this is like the classic example of landlocking, right? We presume that if someone owns 4 and 5, right? Let's just say the same person owns 4 and 5, and they sell 4, landlocking themselves. They're not an idiot. So the courts say, all right, whoever sold 4 actually reserved an easement to cross over onto the main road, right? They didn't actually do it, but we presume they did, because people aren't stupid. Now, again, that's probably a bad assumption, because indeed people make mistakes. They engage in dumb land transactions. So that's the principle underlying this case. We have this huge lot, 2,500 acres, a pretty big lot, which used to be owned by Hill. Okay, and we have 4 sequential transactions. Okay, this website is so old that the casebook uses Flash. I could barely get Flash to run on my computer. I had to actually disable a lot of things to actually get this to run. Here's the first transaction. This is how cool their technology is from this casebook, right? The first transaction was from the year 1896, where Hill sold 100 acres to Rosier. I'm saying Rosier, whatever, right? Okay. Okay, and we know that Rosier acquired this land in 1924. Just to make it easier, I'm just going to say this is Rosier. I know those intermediaries actually doesn't matter. Okay, so in 1896, Rosier's predecessor acquired the 100-acre road. So Colleen, let me just ask a question here, right? At this time, Hill owned all of this green, but he sold this little blue square by the road. Is there any reason to think that Hill would have reserved some sort of easement to escape to the main road?
I mean, if we're going by the principle you just said, which is that people are stupid, yes.
Well, why would Hill have to reserve an easement if he owned all the green
To the,
to get to Beltline Road?
to get to the road.
But could he get to the road by another path?
Depends on where you're coming from.
Green.
I mean, you could go through either one of the perpendicular roads to get there.
Why can't he just go like that? Underneath the blue square. No, these people are on horseback. There's no these roads. Right, this is a farm. There are no cars. Okay. So I think you're overthinking this a little bit too much, right? If I'm Hill and I own all this green stuff, can I ride my horse to Beltline Road without trespassing? Okay, that's right. Okay, the first transaction, the 100 acres, it didn't landlock anyone, so there's no reserve easements going on. Okay? Okay, the second transaction, right? Hill sold 60 acres in 1897 to Othen's predecessor. Othen later acquired it some years later. Okay? Now, Holly, what's problematic about this conveyance, right? Well, why is this one a little bit more problematic? This one makes sense, but this one's not so making sense.
From the case or from just the?
That's a general matter, right? You're buying, if you buy this one, it's like, fine, I'm right near the road, right?
I mean, it's gonna-
What's weird about this one, right?
Well, it's not a direct, easy path.
There's not a direct path to the road. You have to cross either green or blue, right?
Which one is he?
I'm talking about the pink here.
Oh, yeah.
If you're buying this pink square, to get to the road, you need to cross over the green or the blue. You agree with that? Now, was there any problem initially about crossing over the green?
No.
No. And that's why these issues sort of developed. There was permission, right? It was understood that if you need to go from the pink to the road, you can cross over the green. Okay, come with me. All right. The next step is a sale of 53 acres to Othen's predecessor, which eventually Othen acquired in 1913. Again, Malin, is there any problem here with Hill landlocking himself? Is there any issue here?
So for being here is the same.
Yeah.
You know, or that person cannot access to the road, has to go through the road green.
Okay, very good. Exactly. Goes blue or green. I think exactly right. All right. Next transaction. Rosier acquires another 16 acres. You got dark blue and you got some light blue here, right? If you're Rosier, it's not a big deal because you can just go like this and hit the main road. Okay, but if you're Othen, it's a little bit trickier. You have to kind of go like this and maybe go around. Okay. For many years, Othen used a roadway across Rosier's property to travel from the house to the main road. Okay. Was that, name, sorry. Was it? Caitlin, thank you. Was that usage with permission for those many years? Mm-mm. Was there any objection for those years?
No.
Okay. What do we call that when you're letting someone cross over your land with permission? No. There was nothing written. What do you call it when you let someone across your land? Yeah. A license. Group effort. Thank you. Right? So Othen, for many years, used a roadway across Rosier's property. Okay? And there wasn't a problem, right? You can give someone permission. Now, Mac, when you give someone permission to use land, can they claim prescription?
No.
No, why not?
Because the permission can be revoked.
That's right. Right? With permission, it's not hostile. so you don't meet the requirements of prescription. All right, but then something bad happens, right? There was some levee that was built. And as a result, this road, which Othen was used to, became very muddy and became impassable. Now here's the issue. When you give someone a license, Justin, can you revoke it at any point? Okay, which is exactly what happened. He had no objection from crossing the land. Then he said, you know what, I got to build my levee that made the road muddy. It was you couldn't cross it. So then Othen sued to basically enjoin Rosier from keeping the road muddy. He says, look, I was using this road for a long time. I want to keep using it. Stop making the road muddy. And he's like, screw you, that's not my problem. You're using it with my grace. Why do I have to help you out? If you really want to go the road, go pay for an easement to go this way. Go pay an easement to go this way, right? Don't use my road. Okay? Everyone just get the facts? All right, so this goes to court. And the trial court said that Othen had an easement of necessity to get to the road. And the trial court ordered Othen to put the roadway back in use. Okay? Leslie, did the Supreme Court of Texas agree? I'm sorry? I said Leslie. You're like, oh. Oh, you're right, it did. I'm sorry. No, Leslie, right over here. We'll get you eventually. Jump. All right, Leslie, right here.
So they have like 3 different responses as to like what.
Well, just who did Othen get his easement in the end?
No.
That's correct. Okay, so let's start and go through one at a time, right? The first thing the court considers is the necessity doctrine. Just let's talk about necessity for a minute, please.
They said that the landowner did not show this easement, the implied easement, because the others did not show the roadway was a necessity.
Good.
As of the date of the deed.
Okay, and why was this roadway not a necessity under Texas law, at least? Rebecca?
Is it because they said he could have like bought?
Yeah, this is an easy one, right? He's not landlocked, right? He's just in the middle of this huge green field. So I don't know if it was actually green, but at least the picture is green. And he could have just paid someone else to cross their land, right? In other words, in Texas, you don't go to the courts and complain about necessity if there are other free market options at your disposal, right? If you can pay someone, don't come to the courts and complain about necessity. So the court rejects necessity, okay? Then we have another issue, right? Was there any sort of, Anna, was there any sort of reserved easement? That is, when Hill was selling land, would Hill have reserved an easement to cut across this plot?
No.
That's correct. Why not?
There was no agreement?
In what circumstances would there be a reserved easement? When would easements be reserved in this context? What would have to happen in order for there to be a reserved easement? No, Nicole?
Sounds fine. Would it have to be for the land because it went to a different party afterwards?
No.
Either like the church case, you would have to make it first. And then
No. Yeah.
You have to have necessity. when you
Yes.
say this.
If, for whatever reason, Hill had landlocked himself, such that Hill could not get out. Think of this picture, right? Right? If Hill owned 4 and 5, and Hill sold 4, we presume that he reserved an easement to cross from 5 to 4, right? That's what needs to have a reserved easement. They didn't actually do it. We just presumed they would. So Nicole, I'll come back to you. In this case, is there any reason for Hill to have reserved an easement to cut across From here to here? No, why not?
Because he was the one who sold the property for.
Did he need to cut across from here to here? What else could he have done? North or south, right? Top or bottom. So the court rejects the easement by necessity, and the court rejects the idea of an implied, reserved easement, right? And they also reject prescription, which we mentioned earlier, because this was permissive for many years, right? If you're using land with a license with permission, you can't claim prescription. As a result, the court gave Othen Zippo. Got nothing. Yes, Malin?
So the light blue purchased after the pink blue, right?
The light blue purchased after the dark blue.
And what about the pink one?
Here, I'll do it again. Ready? So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
That's the
So
sequence.
What I'm thinking is, if I'm the pink one,
Uh-huh.
I might have used that road
Uh-huh.
at the time, but then this other light blue came and decided to purchase that piece of land,
Uh-huh.
which was covered part of what I used for my road, and that would be my license.
Well, I think by the time that Othen was crossing, all 4 of these had already been purchased,
Okay.
right? Because Othen was the 1920s, right? And this is all in like the 1890s, so the land had been purchased many years, right? The land was actually purchased by the predecessor in interest. It wasn't actually Othen himself and Rosier himself. Okay. Questions on this case? All right. And there's this little funny note that 40 years later, after this huge, neighbor dispute where they all hated each other, Othen's daughter bumped into Rosier's daughter at a cotton gin, which is where people hang out, right? And they made up, which I guess is kind of sweet. And you like that? Yeah, I thought it was kind of cute. Whatever. And then they tore down the house, and it burned down. That's not so sad. Okay. Yeah, I think the picture of where this stuff is now, I checked on Google Earth, and it's all residential now. I mean, it's all like houses and stuff. So, but there's still a lot of empty land. What? It's brown. Yes, good. Very, very. Yeah, that's correct. Very astute. Yeah. It's Texas. Okay. All right. Questions in that case? All right. Let's actually do this diagram I keep teasing. The diagram's in 793, but the question is actually on 794. It's question number 3. So these been the same page when they moved it around, which is annoying. I don't know why they did that. So I'll keep the picture on here, and I'll just call on Terry. All right, you want to read the question 3 for me, please? Yeah, it's in 794, the question. We're at A owns 1 through 5. Here it says A owns 5 adjoining tracts of forest land. It says A owns 5 adjoining tracts. It's number 3 on 794. Okay, so let me just pause you there. I'll come back to you, right? These were all a single tract, but now A owns them as 5 different lots. You have lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4, lot 5. Terry, is there any problem if the same person owns all 5 of these? Is there any issue in terms of accessing the road?
No.
Okay, there's not. All right, go on. Please keep reading.
A purchased each lot from O in a separate transaction. Lot 1 first, lot 2 second, lot 3 third, lot 4 fourth, and finally lot 5.
Oh, okay, so let me stop you there, right? So A goes ahead and buys. What happened at that time? Okay. When A buys 4 from O? What's it called? No, it's not easement by necessity. Waji, what do you call that? It's not easement by necessity. What's that word? No. 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 Yes, reserved. You say there's reserved easement. Okay? We say that when O sold lot 4, they reserved an easement for his benefit, right? All right. So there's an easement reserved. But then, Waji, we see the next thing is that A purchases lot 5. What happens to that reserved easement once A purchases lot 5? Does he need it? So what happens to the easement? Poof. Yeah, it dissolves. It doesn't have any effect anymore, right? All this stuff is like equity, right? You only have it as long as you need it. So at that point, we say that easement was gone. Okay, so Allah, next question. It says A dies intestate. All right, go from there.
A dies intestate.
Meaning he has no will. All right, go on.
Our 5 children, B, C, D, E, and F, are her heirs. In the decree of distribution settling A's estate, the court assigns lot 1 to B, lot 2 to C, lot 3 to D, lot 4 to E, and lot 5 to F. Nothing is said in the decree about lot 5 having an easement of way.
What happens to little F?
Landlocked.
He's F'd, right? He's landlocked, right? He can't rely on the reserved easement because the reserved easement dissolves once A purchases all 5 lots. But Allah, what can F go to court and ask for? That's correct. Okay. You see, they're different phrases, right? 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 F goes to court. Right? F goes to court and says, hey, look, I can't access my land without committing a trespass. Help me out here. And the court will say that, okay, F gets an easement by necessity. Now, where do you put that easement? It doesn't necessarily have to be over 4, right? It could be, but not necessarily. 1 second, Mike. You generally put the easement where it does the least damage, right? You figure out, okay, among all these 4 lots, what's like the least burdensome place to put the easement by necessity?
If it was landlocked like that, and would it still be on the burden of that person to like make the road or make the easement?
Well, so there's 2 points, right? If you're 5, you're F, you're in the middle, and you go to court to get easement by necessity, the court very well will make you pay for the construction of a road, right? Let's just say lot 4 is the lot to build on. Lot 4 doesn't have a choice, right? Once there's a court order saying you build it, you have to build it, but it's not out of lot child number D's, the letter D's pocket. So the court will say whatever the costs are, the owner of lot 5 has to pay for it. It's effectively forcing a sale. Like in an ideal world, the brothers, right, D and F can come to an arrangement, right? But not here. So the court forced them to come to an arrangement.
And that would only work after you only go to court.
Of course, right. You know, I mean, you could imagine your grandpa just died, whatever, right? And you go to your brother, hey, look, I'm in the middle of this stupid lot. Can you please let me out? He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But there's a risk, though, right? If all you have is an oral license that can be revoked at any time, and you get into a fight someday, you're stuck in your lot. So perhaps you just say, screw this, I'm going to court, and I'm going to get easement by necessity.
So what happens? So I mean, he still has to pay for the land, though.
Well, not pay for the land, but pay for the easement, right? Just pay for the right to cross it. And to Mike's question, if there's construction costs to actually pave a road, you have to pay for that as well. This is not common. I don't know how many landlocked pieces of land there are. I think this issue can't come up very often, but you might see it. I don't know. All right. Questions on this chart? Okay. All right, let's move on. The next topic that we want to talk about is easement by prescription. And we covered it really, I think, the first day of class with Van Valkenburg versus Lutz. And just to refresh your memories, that was a case where the guy crossed over a lot every day to get to the main road, and he did it as a shortcut to save time. He had also used the land with a chicken coop and a house. This was a case where I think he had both prescription and adverse possession. Right? Adverse possession means you actually get fee simple. You own the land. Whereas prescription means you have the right to cross it. The elements for prescription and adverse possession are largely the same. The only difference is what do you get at the end? You actually get a fee simple or you get an easement. And that's what's different. You have to have the same period. Has to be open and notorious, continuous, adverse, under claim of right. So whatever the claim of right jurisdiction you're in, whether it's hostile trespasser or where you say if mine doesn't matter, the standard's the same. Okay. There is one difference though. Generally, to gain adverse possession, it has to be exclusive. That is, you're the only person living on that land. If there's someone else living in the land, you might share it with tacking, or maybe you don't get it at all. But with prescription, lots of people can walk across a path. And each person who walks across the path may be eligible for prescription. Right, that's the Rockefeller Center example I gave you, and I think it's now in your reading for today, right? You have millions of people walking over this sidewalk every year. In theory, each one can claim prescriptive easement, which is why they shut down the sidewalk to just block it. Say, nope, it was not continuous. He didn't do it every day. Okay. In Texas, though, the court seems to suggest that only one person can get a prescriptive easement. That rule doesn't make much sense, but that might be an outlier position. But generally, it does not be exclusive. So I think Texas might be a bit of an outlier in that front. Okay. Again, I don't think this comes up often, but you'll see it. I'm so sorry, Catherine. You're not on my peripheral vision. If you want to sit somewhere else, I'm so sorry. I can't see these corners. It's just my vision doesn't go that far.
Whenever, going back to the problem like with, if F were to sell that land, that easement by necessity, does the court deem to go away?
I think it would remain. Although, frankly, would you buy that land that's landlocked?
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost an unmarketable piece of land. I don't think the subsequent buyer would have to go to court to litigate again. I think the easement would just continue because necessity still exists, right? But let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example that's not terrible. But like, let's just say that, there's some sort of a natural disaster and like a river, came over here and gave them access to it or something, right? If the necessity was no longer present, then the easement goes away.
I'm just thinking like how
I'm can't think of a good example.
market.
Yeah, you sell it's very cheap, right? This is not desirable real estate because you're screwed. You're stuck in the middle.
But doesn't that go against waste?
The-
Policy against waste?
It would. Yeah, this is not a very desirable piece of land. Lacey? Really? Tell us, what was that about?
So this guy owned like 40 acres, and he sold a 2-tract acre to like his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like all surrounded by like forest, and there was a road called Richardson Road right here. And so they paved a dirt road across the rest of the brother's land
Mm-hmm.
for him to access Richardson Road. And later our client bought it, and the original 40-acre owner sold all of the rest of his land to a developer.
Mm-hmm.
And the developer cleared it all and then made a new paved road to our client's house so that they could take the dirt to make backyards into some of their
So then he was stuck.
so it was no longer a necessity. She had to use the other road even though her like address and everything was Richardson Road.
Lost her easement.
Yeah, we took it all the way to Supreme Court.
The state Supreme Court?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Hamrick versus Wood. It's a great case actually.
What? Say it again. What's the name?
Hamrick versus Wood.
Can you send me a link to it later, please?
Shall.
Thank you so much.
Question.
Yes, Mike.
Is easements, is that overused term?
Yes.
Because I'm
People
trying
use
to-
it people use the word easement in completely bizarre ways that are not even remotely.
Because I'm trying to use this, and then in my head
It's
start talking about city easements and stuff like that, and I'm
Well, there are easements with the city, but
Yes, but
this is a word that people use in technical fashion. Sort of like deed, right? Everyone thinks a deed is the piece of paper, right? Or the title is a piece of paper, they're interchangeable, right? They're not. So, yeah, unfortunately, lawyers, you learn words that have different meanings than you thought they did, and then you're stuck with them. Yes, Colleen.
So I guess my question is, so if you're the homeowner of 5, how does the court determine, I mean, you really only need one pathway, right, to get to one of these, let's say they're all roads all around. And each pathway is probably gonna cost about the same amount of money, because it looks like they're all equal distance.
Yeah, how do you pick which one?
How do you pick which one? Because then 1 and 2 might have a use, but it could be 2 and 4, 3 and 4, 1 and 2.
I mean, if all things being equal, maybe you flip a coin. I don't know, you roll a dice. I don't know. I mean, the rule is you try and do the least disruptive one, but your question is they're all equally disruptive.
Say it's just a flat piece of land, like how does the court just pick it up? Because if I was homeowner 4 and my land is the one that's picked for the easement, I'd say, well, why didn't you go to the
Yeah, I think with this sort of lot, you're screwed. I don't think there's a good answer. It's a good question. I don't think there's a good answer. I mean, this is such like a perfect example for a textbook, right? But I can't imagine this ever existing in reality like this, where it's all 4 equally sized, squares. Anything else? Yes, Davis.
The exclusivity element for prescriptive
Yeah.
easement. Is there not an exclusivity element, or is it that every?
Apparently, there's not, but I think the Texas court suggested that you would need to have exclusive crossing, which I think is a bit of an outlier rule. But that's the rule that we have here. Anything else on prescriptive easements? Okay. Let's move to the next topic, which involves beach access. Beach access. I'll presume everyone's been to a beach. Yeah. Look. I don't know. I mean, I can't presume these things. I don't. I mean, Galveston, I guess, is not too far, but. Well, it is a beach. It's meant to be a nice beach. But it's a beach. Well, look, it's a beach, okay? Now, what is a beach? I know this sounds like a really stupid question, but a beach is a very specific thing. It's where the ocean, right, meets land, okay? Now, water is fluid, so to speak, right? Water is not in a fixed spot. You have what you might call high tide, and you have what you call low tide. And depending on the time of the day, the water can come out and come into shore. All right? And when you look at a beach, you see different zones, right? So here you have permanent structures, right? You have vegetation, right? When you have permanent structures and you have some sort of trees and stuff, that tells you the water doesn't usually go there. Why? Because water is salt, and if the salt goes there, it'll destroy the plants. And as you go towards the shore, you start seeing not so many trees, you see grass, right? Which means sometimes rain, the water goes there, but not usually. And then you keep going, you get to sand, kind of like the lighter sand, right? That means water goes there sometimes, but not always. And then you get to sort of the darker sand, right? Which means that there's water there at high tide, then it pulls back. Okay. Then eventually you get to the darkest sand, which is where the water waves, and you get to the water. Okay. Who owns these various zones of the beach? Okay, and that's the topic for our next case. At common law, the actual water itself was owned by the public, the state, right? You could not own the ocean. The state owns it. The idea was everyone should have access to the ocean. For many years, this was the only mode of transportation people had. That's you want to go somewhere, you go by water, right? The tricky part becomes, how do you get to the water, right? It's easy enough to say you can access the water, but how do you get there? There are 2 types of access to water. There's what's called vertical access, which means basically coming from the shore to the main road, right? Vertical access. I think in every state in the union, you have to have what's called vertical access. If you have beachfront property, you have certain obligations. And depending how the land is laid out, you might have to allow people to walk across your land. Now, if you ever go to the beach, you'll see something like, a sign that says, you can cross from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. or signs like that, right? Why is that sort of sign there? It's giving you a license, right? It's to basically block prescription, saying, look, I'm giving you permission to cross in a certain fashion, okay? Everyone agrees, at least in most states, that you have the right of vertical access. The next case is not about the vertical access. The next case is about the horizontal access. That is, can you walk across the sand, right? Can you walk across the sand? And you have different types of sand. You have the sand with the grass, you have the dry sand, and you have the wet sand. These are different layers of the zone. And we have a case from New Jersey, of course. What does New Jersey do? You know the answer, right? They reverse the common law. This is a weird case, right? A lot going on here. But it's a Jersey thing. You wouldn't understand. All right. Who's next? Michael, you next?
Yeah.
All right, Michael, you want to?
You don't have to, but you can skip.
No, you're next. You're next. Michael, you want to give me the facts in Matthews versus Bayhead Improvement Association, New Jersey, 1984.
So, I believe I actually read from next week.
Oh, God.
I'm on Miller.
What'd you read?
Miller, Lutheran Conference.
Yeah, that's next week.
Okay, well,
Now, if I was a jerk, I'd ask what are the facts of that case.
I can tell you.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to. I think I told you. I had a professor in law school who did that. Susan, I read for next week, and he asked the question. He didn't read it. He was just making it up. But I believe you. Kevin, did you read the other one too?
Yeah, because how did you have it lined up in the?
You just kept reading. Yeah. So in the last casebook, they rearranged everything, and they put this in a random chapter. It makes no sense, right? So unfortunately, you have to jump. So you didn't do it either? Who didn't read this case? A lot of you? Wow. Demetrius, you read the case? Alexis, you read it? You read in Property 1. All right, Tom, you want to give me the facts? I think you read it.
Yes, sir.
Let's go get shh. Let me give the facts. One person read the damn case.
Bayhead Improvement Association basically owned portions of the beach.
Good.
And the way they had this organization set up was you had to be only members were allowed to use this beach. So the issue there was
Paying members, right?
Say again?
Paying members.
Yes, paying members. And the only way you could be there was like some stipulations you had to live there, so on and so on. So usually it's like influential rich people is how I saw it.
Oh God, no! This is the Jersey, not rich people. It's just
okay.
anyone from New York or New Jersey?
I thought he told us
You-
that was the nice part.
Who said think Snooki? Right. So I grew up in Staten Island, and basically the Jersey Shore cast was basically my peers. Like I'm roughly their age, and I didn't know them, but they went to high school around the same time I did. Yeah, so I have an affinity for that show. That's perhaps unnatural. I've actually been to all of the Jersey Shore houses. I went to the one in Jersey the year they were filming in I think it was in 2012 or so, and they weren't there. They were somewhere else. I was so mad. I went to the house right near my house in Staten Island. I did. I have a T-shirt from the T-shirt shop. Danny made it. It's true. I did. I was in Florence and I visited the house there. I mean, I didn't go there for that reason. I was in Florence for other reasons, but I went to Florence. And I was in Miami and I went to the Metropole.
Oh, you like just followed them.
I had an exam question in Jersey Shore about 7 or 8 years ago. I think it's too dated now. No one will get it, but it was like Superstorm Snooki. It was like a storm case. Anyway.
Sorry.
So you had and so these were not wealthy people. These were just.
Sorry, my apologies. I thought
These were just. Anyway, go on.
So in order to become a member, you had to pay for it. But, so the issue with that was, how are non-residents able to get to the beach?
Mhm.
And that was the biggest problem.
Right.
So, essentially, they were prohibited to use the beach, but like you said, the state owns the ocean.
Now, just to be clear, how far do these people have to walk, Tom, to get to the beach?
It was like a stupid amount, like 5 miles or something like that.
I don't think it was that far.
It was,
I think it was a few.
1.25 miles.
Yeah, so basically like, a 15-minute walk, right? Or a very short drive. They had access to the beach. There were public beaches nearby, but the nature of this case was that the advocate, these people who litigate for the people, were upset that they had to go somewhere else for access to the beach. And they wanted to be able to have both vertical and horizontal. That is, they want to walk across the entire beach without having to pay dues and paying memberships to these groups. And it was restricted. I mean, the reason why you have private beach clubs is to keep people out. It wasn't, maybe it was to keep Snooki out. I don't know. But, yeah. Okay, Kate, did you read this one?
I mean, I remember it from property line.
Okay. Fine. All right, so what did the court do here?
The court reversed and affirmed part of it.
Okay.
Is it gonna just read? The public trust doctrine acknowledged that the ownership, dominion, and sovereignty over land flowed by tidal waters which extend to the mean high water mark, is vested in
What's the mean high water mark? And let me just bring this picture up. What does that mean?
like where the yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's usually right around here, right? It's where kind of the wet sand turns to the dry sand, right? Usually the public space is the wet sand to the dry sand, this line which is not fixed. So what they were really asking for is the ability to sit and walk across the dry sand, hence the meme. The Jersey Supreme Court held that the law protects the right to sunbathe and enjoy recreational activities, right? The upshot of this case is you can't enjoy the water without tanning on the beach. This is actually New Jersey jurisprudence. This is I'm not making this up. This is there. The public has a right to bathing, swimming, and also enjoying sunbathing, which is basically tanning. As a result, the court says that this private beach club, which was a for-profit business, was acting illegally, and that they were required to open up their membership just about everyone. I remember this growing up. They have beach clubs in New Jersey, which wasn't really a club. You just go there and you pay for the day, right? You pay $5 or $10 and you get in, and that's it. Celeste, where in Jersey were you from?
I'm from Kenilworth. It's really close to Newark.
By the airport.
Yeah.
I go there all the time.
I love Cory Booker. Yeah.
Ah, well, very good. Well, I fly to Newark Airport quite a bit. God, that's why I love South Texas. Actually, I appreciate that no one knows who he is. It actually makes me very happy. It's like a brief refuge from the rest of the world. So I'm very happy. Yeah, good. All right. Let's move on. Come on. So the court says you can have these private beach clubs have to be open to the public. And indeed, some years later, the New Jersey court said, we're going to set the rates. And they actually establish how much you have to pay. So if you go to one of these Jersey beach clubs, they have a sign that says, $5 for the day. And as long as you pay that, you can access the shore. You can still restrict access to the beach house, right? Just go back to the picture. There was an actual beach club. The court doesn't hold that you have access to the club itself. All they say is that you have to have access to the dry sand. The related issues, what about like umbrellas, right? What about like beach chairs, these various services? Those don't have to be offered to the public, but the actual sand itself, you have to have access. If you ever go to Miami Beach, they have these huge beaches with all these sort of sectioned off areas with these lounge chairs and umbrellas. They can reserve those for their hotel guests and members. Okay. Questions? Okay, let me sum up, and I think it's all I have for today. Get going early. When you're talking about easements, you have to make sure you have different categories. You have the implied easements, and you have the easements by prescription. With implied easement, it can either be a quasi-easement, which is inferred from prior use, or you can have the easement by necessity, which is based on how much you need it. Is it just necessary, or in Texas, is it strictly necessary? For prescription, you have all the same elements as adverse possession, and you have to be open and notorious, possible claim of right, and the requisite number of years. One way that I can often test on this is I can give you a case where it might look like you meet the requirements of prescription, but you don't, which means you default to a quasi-easement, right? You have to say, oh, we don't meet the requirements for prescription, but you can still do an implied quasi-easement. So even if you fail the prescription elements, you can still do the other one. So that's often one way they can teach it. It's probably more of a quasi-easement. The example I gave you is what if you're there for 9 years and the limit's 10? The court say, yep, good, that's enough, right? The quasi-easement is based on prior usage, which may not meet the requirements of prescription. Anything else? All right, I will see you all in class on Tuesday. And reminder, no class on next Thursday, a week from today. So you can complain about it to the dean if you want. I'm kidding. All right, thank you.